So this morning, we're so honored to have Mr. Dunbar with us again. It's wonderful to see you again, Mr. Dunbar. He was beautifully introduced on Saturday by Gerald Filson, so I'm not even going to attempt to add anything to it. I'm not going to do any justice to it. But I just do want to say again, to express our gratitude for your presence, for a wonderfully inspiring and stirring talk on Saturday, and that we're all eagerly waiting to hear from you this morning on the subject of faith, hope, and the afterlife. So without any further ado, Mr. Dunbar, please.
Tustani Aziz Alawapa. They've got the light shining in my face, but I think there's some of you out there. I see some. Well, I was asking the master this morning, what do these people need to hear? You know, they're all solid Baha'is for centuries, 5th generation, 4th generation. My goodness, what can I possibly add? But maybe he'll help us. We'll all be inspired in some way to add joy to this occasion and hopefully inspiration for you for the days to come. What a subject. Faith, hope. And if that wasn't enough, then the afterlife is added on to it. Let's talk a little bit about faith. You know from some answered questions, which is such an essential text that we should be studying individually. Someone was saying that they had heard here or there that we didn't need to study the Gone and some answered questions anymore because we have the Ruhi books. And I was saying that these are essential. These are in the writings, the importance of these are in the writings of Baha'u'llah himself and of Abdul Baha and of the Guardian. And the House of Justice has never said such a thing. So that may be the view, and maybe some of the people are satisfied with just having Ruhi books. I don't know how that is. But I think beyond that, we have an obligation to learn these texts for ourselves. If there's some discouragement to having classes, taking people's time for it, still individually, we have our relationship with Baha'u'llah that has to be nurtured and strengthened and developed. Now, that doesn't mean that the Ruhi books aren't important. The House of Justice encouraged the Institute process with the basis of the Ruhi books. I think that if you're a sound studied Baha'i, you could say that the Ruhi books doesn't teach me anything new. But that's not the point. The point is that as teachers of the faith, as knowledgeable Baha'is, you would want to know what's in those Ruhi books and understand the method, because you may be pointing people to take the Ruhi, the Institute courses. So surely we should be familiar with them and not think in terms of whether we already know it or we don't know it. It has a certain methodology about it that is helping in the progress of the plans. And so we need to be generous, and we need to have some basic understanding of that, I think. And we don't lose anything in that process, surely. But behind that, you have your personal study of the Aktas and the Igan and some answered questions and all these wonderful holy tablets that have poured out of the kingdom on high for our enlightenment. Faith is a kind of mysterious business. I want to relate first a letter of the Guardian written on the Guardian's behalf, actually by a wonderful early Baha'i, Ethel Rosenberg. The Guardian had called her to Haifa in the early 1920s to help with the secretariat work for a time. And one of the friends had written to the Guardian and said, you know, I have dreams, and in those dreams I receive guidance. I wonder if you would tell me if should I follow that guidance or not follow that guidance? That's the sense of it, not the exact words, but that's the sense of it. And the letter that comes back from Shoghi Effendi says that indeed guidance can be sent to the believers through dreams, but this is not the normal source of inspiration and guidance. that comes in the writings themselves, in the revelation itself. And because of the fact that the self is very deceptive, our inner self is very deceptive, our prejudices and our loves and our hates, the inspiration that comes to us, the guidance that comes to us, we distort and warp it. Are these words clear? Distort and warp. Because we take that guidance and we pass it through the filter of our understanding, and we say, well, this must mean this, or it must mean that, and we get it pretty close to our lower desires as we can. And that's the danger. So Shoghi Effendi says, when you have a dream with guidance in it, compare it first to the holy writings. Is it in conformity with the writings? If it matches the verses of God, if you can't find anything contrary to the teachings, then you could consider whether you want to act on it or not. But the main source of guidance, of course, for all of us, and many of us never have dreams with guidance in it, obviously, is to follow the verses of God. Shoghi Effendi goes on in that letter that was sent out over his name to say that the inspiration that we receive in dreams is a constant inspiration shining on us at every instant. The Sun of Truth is delivering its guidance, its support, its sustenance to us at all times. But we move away, we change our vision away from it. And he said, even in wakeful hours you can receive this inspiration. And that he hoped that the friends would refine their character to the stage where they would become aware of this. Abdul Baha'i, in his travels to the West, he talks about the divisions of the spirit. And one explanation in tablets, also he talks about the divisions of the nafs. And then he's a parallel tablet which says it's the divisions of the ruh. So that you realize that these are interchangeable terms often. Sometimes they're very specific. He does a breakdown of soul, mind, and spirit and makes them three separate things. But sometimes they're really basically one power coming from God, this power of the Son of Truth, this power of the Holy Spirit, this power of the will of God. And all these are titles of the same thing when they're acting in different ways and have different aspects to them. And in that breakdown of he talks, of course, as you know, about the mineral spirit and the animal spirit and the human spirit. And then he talks in the Some Answered Questions about the spirit of faith as the next degree. And then the Holy Spirit, the divine spirit itself as he describes five. He doesn't put the mineral there, but you find that in other tablets. So above the human spirit is the spirit of faith. And faith, Abdul Baha says in one of his tablets, is conscious knowledge. Not a hearsay knowledge, not a knowledge we kind of hear about and wonder about, but something that is now part of us. And in another place he says the spirit of faith is the effect of the Holy Spirit breathed into the human spirit. In order to have the steady flow of this spirit of faith, which obviously now is not something that you can acquire or buy or have on a permanent basis, it depends on the mirror of the heart being faced towards the Sun of Truth. And then it depends on getting rid of the things that shouldn't be on the surface of the mirror so that it reflects the light clearly, he tells us. You know, he says, cleanse the mirror of thy heart with the burnish of the Spirit. Again, our approach and attitude toward the holy words of God, toward the beauty of this light that shines through them, all of that is essential for us to have a spirit of faith. Now, in other talks and tablets, he describes the spirit of faith. He likens it to the baptism of water and fire that's mentioned by Jesus Christ in the Evangel. This is he describes it as a transformative spirit. I myself am troubled by what he says the Spirit of Truth can produce in your soul, because I see some trace now and then, but I don't. What he talks about, he says, you will then come with the spirit of faith to all knowledge. And you'll fulfill these phases that are mentioned in the passage about the true seeker in the Egon, that he says you'll have a new eye and a new heart and a new ear. He also says in other places, to the degree that you've refined your spiritual life, to that degree you enter the next world. It kind of fixes you there. Then the mercy of God has to carry you through other stages. But we don't want to neglect that. We don't want to think, well, I'm too old to do that or something like that. We're never at the end of our path. And how can we breathe this spirit of faith? Now, I understand that this directly results from our reciting the verses of God, from meditating on the verses of God, from studying the Holy Writings. All of these things gradually form a new texture, if you will. You know how Shoghi Effendi talks about crystallization. You have a kind of a murk. Excuse me, not you, me. I have a kind of a murk inside, confused understandings. But as I read the verses of God, it's if the salts of the Spirit enter that murk, and they have a predetermined crystallization pattern, and at some point that murk changes into a crystal. And inherently, our divine nature, Abdu'l-Baha and Baha'u'llah, likened to a gem with many facets, each one individualized. Part of that we're the reflections of the names and attributes of God is that we all reflect potentially all the names and attributes of God, but some of them have a dominant place in our spiritual character. So we have the main one, the secondary ones, but that distribution of proportional representation, if you will, of the divine names makes each of us different. And that's one of the things that we can make a unique, our reflection of the spirit of faith, our reflection of the spirit of truth, our reflection of this sun of reality, as it increases in us, it becomes quite distinct from everybody else and becomes then the joy of the friends of God to meet us, if you will, because they see this other dimension of spirituality in us, and it inspires them. And that becomes what Abdu'l-Baha says, light upon light. When the friends meet each other, it causes excitement because they see the reality of faith in the other, and it strengthens them. And this, of course, is the basis of the spiritual unification of mankind that Baha'u'llah has come to accomplish. I remember years ago at the American Convention, Horace Holly was talking, the hand of the cause. The father of the administration, Shoghi Effendi called him. He drafted these documents of incorporation of the National and Local Assembly and so many important works. And he was saying that Baha'i unity is not a decision on our part to put up with each other, to get along, to say, well, I'm just going to get along. That's not it. He said the Baha'i unity is to move ourselves from that level of judging each other and deciding who we want to be friends with or not, moving it up to another level where this power of the Son of Truth, the power of the love of God, so informs us that we feel the love of mankind in a general way. We also have letters and tablets that say, naturally, we're not going to love every individual for their bad qualities. That's impossible. We all have this thing. But to not let observing of those things deteriorate or spoil the love we have for mankind. And as we were talking about the other day, the letter that comes from the beloved, no matter how soiled it is, no matter how dirty it is, to know that there's a message. There is an inherent spiritual reality distinct from every other spiritual reality of human beings in that soul. And we want to bring it out. We want to enhance it. We want to enliven it. And that, of course, is the teaching work. Abdu'l-Baha in the Divine Plan, he doesn't say, go and distribute pamphlets. He says, breathe life into the souls of others. He says, become incarnate light. Now, this is the thing that I think is so important for us to realize with respect to the Egon and some answered questions, is that they help to attract that light and to fix it in your being. then whatever Baha'i activity you're called upon to do, you have an informed spirit, you have a compassionate spirit, you have a loving spirit. Doesn't mean you don't see shortcomings, but you forgive and forget. Shoghi Effendi said the solution for every problem of disunity in the community and between families and between friends, and God knows we know there's a lot of them. We can all think of one right this minute if we stop and think of it. He said forgive and forget is the only way beyond that. You have to put it behind you. We put it behind us because Baha'u'llah has called for the unity of mankind, and that requires a sacrifice of our own personal hurts and feelings. How many times you would hear believers say, forgive and forget? The guardian said, forgive and forget. They said, okay, I can forgive, but I can't forget. And that can't forget holds you in a spell of darkness. And it's not healthy. So think of all the people that you need to forgive and forget. And they'll think of you, and maybe things will get better, you know. All right. The spirit of faith then is a blessing proceeding from God at any moment that you feel it. And sometimes you don't feel it, it goes away because you turn the mirror again towards worldly matters and other things, or against these conflicts that we have. And that spirit lessens. You have to turn the mirror towards the light. You know, when Mirza Yahya proclaimed himself to be an independent manifestation of God in Adrianople, then, and Baha'u'llah discounted that, then one of the believers came to him with questions that the covenant breakers were asking about. How can the morn of eternity, the light of eternity, how can it not be any more the light of eternity? And he said, everything in this creation is based on the mirror of our own reality. When we turn that reality, the mirror of our inner being, towards the light, it shines in us. And then people praise us and extol us, and they give us titles, and they have all kinds of wonderful things to say, as long as the mirror is faced toward the light. He said the problem with Sobi Azal is that he's turned the mirror away from the light. And when the mirror is turned away from the light, nothing of praise remains. It's all degradation. Now, there's a very good lesson for us. We want to keep, no matter what our past is and how, this is, by the way, friends, this forgive and forget has to apply to our own nature. Baha'u'llah tells us, take our own faults and mistakes to his threshold and beg forgiveness, and then leave it in the hands of God. If we fall down, we say, oh, I fell down because I made a terrible mistake, and I'm not getting up again. This is the end of our spiritual growth. He says he's the ever-forgiving and the all-merciful. You have to trust that he can take anything you can give him. I mean, if he offers a total forgiveness to Mirza Yahya in the Kitab-i Aqdas, what can we do to spoil that for ourselves? We really can't. There's that marvelous passage in the end of the Gleanings where he says, if it weren't for the mistakes of the friends, how would the name of God, the All-Merciful, shine forth? The Ever-Forgiving shine forth. So let us also remember we have to forgive ourselves. We have to forgive our children when they make mistakes. We have to forgive our parents when they make mistakes. This is not, as Abdu'l-Baha says, this is not a world of perfections. So in case you didn't find perfection in your life, you're fulfilling one of the verses of Abdu'l-Baha. So, I mean, we're all in that same condition. But we should try, through this, the dynamic of this forgive and forget and turning towards the light, try to refresh ourselves completely. And this, he says in the morning, turn to the verses of God, recite the verses of God, give wings to the Spirit. I think that's the beginning of our Baha'i study. It's not the end, but that's to refresh us, to make us acceptable, if you will, in the sight of God in our activities during the day. You know how many places Abdu'l-Baha says we have three realities. We have an animal reality. That's the inheritance of coming into life here. It begins in the womb and then it comes into full bloom with a human body that develops all of its capacities, animal capacities. But together with that reality, the human being has a second reality, which he says is the reality of the intellectual life. He has a mind, he has thoughts. But that reality at the beginning is neutral. If it's not attracted by the teachings of God, it joins with the animal and makes a lot of trouble. It ends up doing things, Abdu'l-Baha says, that no animal would ever conceive of doing. Human beings go way beyond that. I mean, no animal ever conceived of nuclear weapons that could wipe out millions of people with one bomb. I mean, this is the devil that we read about through all the teachings of the past, and which Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha define as the lower self. When the lower self is in operation, controlling the mind and its lower passions are dominant, all kinds of problems can come out. But Abdu'l-Baha says we have a divine reality, a third reality. All of these are basically spiritual, but they're animal spiritual and human spiritual. But we have a divine spiritual, if you will, that comes through the breath of the Holy Spirit, through the writings that are given to us to guide our reality. And when that begins to inform us, it strengthens the intellectual. It awakens it to truth. And it enables it to dominate the lower nature. Not that we don't have temptations and we don't have bad thoughts sometimes, but it gives us a means of controlling those, of keeping them in their place. If you remember Abdu'l-Baha in one place, he talks about the body is like a horse, and the soul is like the rider on the horse. If the rider doesn't have control of the horse will carry it wherever it wants to do and throw it off a cliff or whatever. We don't know what it does. It leads to madness. But if the soul dominates the body, controls the lower self and the passions, then that mount on a horse becomes a royal thing. And he can take the horse, or she can take the horse, and she can go wherever they want to go. They can go up places that they wouldn't easily go on foot because they have control of this lower self. That's what he calls us to, he invites us to. And I think that's this same quality of faith. The faith that then pervades our lower being and keeps it in check. Doesn't go away. Shoghi Effendi says that it requires the chaste and holy life, for example, he says requires daily vigilance. He doesn't say requires daily vigilance before the age of 25. He says daily vigilance. We still have imagination. And that imagination, oftentimes we get an imagination that's inappropriate and we dress it, we undress it and make trouble for ourselves. The imagination is wonderful because it allows us to form images from the words of God. But it also, if we indulge it and expose it to things that are not appropriate, guard thine eyes from all save my beauty, Baha'u'llah says. These are the lines. He gives us the guidance to get through to the afterlife safely, to preserve the flame of the soul. Abdu'l-Baha says that the flame of the soul, the best condition for it is to have tests and difficulties and calamities. That makes it burn bright. The wind makes the fire brighter. Strange, he says in some place. I don't know if I mentioned this in the other talk, but strange, he says, that I rejoice in your sufferings. It's because Abdu'l-Baha knows that those things that God sends us and that we suffer, and by the very nature of things we're going to suffer. I mean, how many people have lost their mother and you want to complain to God, I lost my mother, but it's part of creation. Somebody wrote Abdu'l-Baha, he said, I prayed and prayed that so-and-so wouldn't die, and then they died. So what's the use of my prayer? Maybe the prayer should help you to resign yourself that this is the part of the creation of life. Abdu'l-Baha says if everybody that prayed that nobody die, if their prayer was answered, the world would be completely overpopulated and no one would go to the next world and to the great reward and rejoicing that they're destined for. And sometimes we have to think about these things. Naturally, you have a grief in loss of loved ones. and things are mysterious. But those tests keep the soul on course, if indeed it turns to prayer to understand and resolve the sufferings. And I know all of you have different levels of these in your being. In the writings, we're told to hear with our own ears and see with our own eyes. One of the great failings of mankind is blind imitation of the past. And we want to take a fresh look at the writings, even though we may have had parents that taught us the writings and had their ideas, but our ideas would be perhaps reflect the light of that because of our different natures in a different way. So we constantly want to renew our understanding of the teachings. And the Bob, for instance, in his writings says we have various levels of vision. We have the vision of the human level, which is a source of much information and inspiration to us. But then we have that of the spirit, and we have that of the intellect, and finally we have the eye of the inner spirit. You know, this is the fuad that he mentions. And he said, only with that eye can you see the mysteries and beauty of divine unity in creation. Are we stopping too soon? Are we saying, well, I don't know, I can never get there, or that's too high for me? The other thing is that as you move up this scale of vision, every time you look at the verses of God, they reveal new truths to you that correspond to that point in the character of your development and your vision. They correspond, they lock in. And things flow out of the writings at different stages in our lives that are these are the huri, the divine maidens that come out of the writings, the pearls which we discover in the writings by constantly revisiting them. We're never going to finish reading the Agon. We're never going to have enough of the hidden words, because with every day that passes and every week that goes on, those will have a new significance for us. Hear with thine own ear and see with thine own eyes. Then Baha'u'llah goes further than that. He tells us, if you want to behold me, you have to behold me with my own eye and hear my verses with my ear. Don't be trying to place it within the context of past revelations or past understandings. Come fresh to it. Now, as I understand from my little experience with all this, is that the self is here and the station of servitude is here. And we keep moving along this. Maybe we yo-yo a bit, but we move along it until we can arise. If we can arise to selflessness and servitude, then we become instruments of the divine purpose. And of course, that's what we're intended to be. And the highest stations of the next world have to do with those souls that have reached the threshold of servitude, if you will. Do you remember Baha'u'llah says that he quotes one of the Imams in the Epistle to the Son of the Wolf. He says, servitude is a matter, the essence of which is divinity. You move away from self, you move closer to being a reflection of the names and attributes of God. As you go up, it gets brighter, and self drops away, and the influence of self drops away. It doesn't mean you won't have tests, because those tests are meant to refine that vision and to refine that reflection. So we have those goals ahead of us, if you will, with the question of the spirit of faith, the reality of faith. And out of that derive our hope, if you will, faith, hope, and the afterlife. With respect to hope, we put our trust in God, we demonstrate our trust in God by obedience to his laws and his ordinances. And right at the top of the list, of course, at the beginning he says recognition of the manifestation. Then he adds obedience to his teachings as a dual obligation. So we need to know what he invokes, what he asks of us. And he asks us then, as the greatest act of all of our lives, is teaching of the cause. But he says, teaching, you want to teach yourself first. You want to bring the horse under control first, and then you can teach riding to others, so to speak. How can we do that? We have to think about that. We can say to ourselves, oh, I can't teach the faith. And this is something that the House of Justice wanted to point out to the Friends, that it's not just those who are endowed with the ability to public speak and to do those things that are teachers of the cause. Everyone is required to teach. There's no, in the tablets, there's no footnote that says, this is for the Baha'is that are beautiful, handsome, rich, and have ability to travel on their own money. It doesn't say anything like that. It says everyone has the obligation to teach the cause of God. There's no clergy. Who's going to spread the faith of God if the Baha'is don't do it? Now, we were talking about the last session. Living the life is the greatest means of teaching the faith. That is, when you shine with the light of the faith, that attracts people. And maybe you can't say anything. I know there were teachers in Nicaragua in the early days. There was one fellow who would bring people to us. We were pioneers in a small jungle town. He was a Baha'i. He was so enthusiastic. And he'd bring his friends. He'd say, I brought my friends here to hear about the faith. And the friend says, I asked him what was the name of the faith. He said he couldn't remember. I asked him, well, who's the prophet? And he said, I can't remember. But they can tell you, I'll take you there. But his enthusiasm and the Spirit was able to, now if he can do that, we can do anything for the cause, if you will, you know. Instructions for teaching. We have a marvelous compilation on the power of divine assistance prepared by the House of Justice with its research department and then sent out to the Baha'i world several decades ago. But these, of course, are all filled still with very valid information. When you want to arise to teach, Shoghi Effendi over and over says you have to disregard your own shortcomings. If you want to say to yourself, look, I lived a life, I was a businessman, or I wasn't, or whatever I was, that how can possibly God use me as an instrument to teach the faith? We neutralize ourselves. He says you can't do that. You will become discouraged, you will become depressed, and you'll never move. So you have to disregard. It means put out of your mind that I don't have enough knowledge, I don't have enough wealth, I'm not pretty enough, or whatever you think it is. Put it out of your mind. The next stage of the letters says you must rehearse, you must review the divine promises. You must take hope, if you will, in the divine promises. Trust in them. And in one wonderful letter of the Guardian during the crusade, he said, let the doubter arise and put to test the promises of God. Arise and do something and see. Then you find these promises are fulfilled in you. They're animating you. They're setting you in a new direction. The third stage is after forgetting your shortcomings, observing the divine promises. The third stage, a whole series of letters, I hope you read them for yourself, says that we have to then arise and act. I remember the dear Baha'is in California told me when I was a new Baha'i something that made a lot of sense. They said, you're like a car, you know, and if you want to be guided, you have to turn the car on and drive it. You can't just sit there and say, oh God, guide me. Move, act. And in that process, he can guide you. And the same thing with these so-called 5 steps of prayer. It says you should pray and then meditate and then decide on what you're going to do. Okay. Once you decide on what you're going to do, then you should take action so that God can reveal to you whether that's the proper action you should have been taking or not. As you're moving, you start to get new understanding and guidance. One of the friends, Shoghi Effendi, was at the pilgrim table. They said he was asking about the fulfillment of one of the goals of the plan. And this person had said something like, well, Shogi Effendi, I think we've done everything we can. It just isn't the will of God. It doesn't seem to be the will of God. Shogi Effendi got a little, he said, finding the will of God is like this, he said. You go to the closed door and you knock on it. Then he says, if it doesn't open, then you bang on it. If that doesn't open, then you throw your whole body against the door over and over again. And if it still doesn't open, then maybe it's the will of God. We give up too easily, you know. We say, well, this doesn't seem to be in my life to do this or that. Make an effort. Okay, I'm going to make a pioneer call here now. Without any authority from the National Assembly or even the House of Justice. So you forgive me. This comes from a tablet of Baha'u'llah himself to a woman who obviously was in Iran, shut in the house and couldn't move herself out because of the situation of the life of women in Iran. And Baha'u'llah so beautifully says to her that it's important to pioneer. But he said, there's essential pioneering and then there's movement in the world. The essential pioneering has to do with pioneering to the realm of the love of God. That's the pioneer call I think we should all remember. He's calling us to move towards this spirit of faith, towards this holy hope that he's instilled in his writings, and become dwellers in the realm of the love of God. Essential. If you do that, he said, you will affect the world, even though you never leave your house. If you leave your house without that, you don't have much effect. It's quite an interesting definition that he gives there, and so encouraging to those of us that may be old and not able to do things. We can still pioneer to the love of God. We can still increase that. Is there any limit to the love of God? How much you can obtain, how much you can enjoy? And then in miraculous ways, he can open the door for you to teach. Suddenly a neighbor asks you about the faith, or a friend writes you from somewhere abroad, or so many different possibilities that arise. Have we given up on teaching? That greatest gift of God, he tells us in the Will and Testament. The greatest gift of God. And why is it such a great gift of God? Because as you teach, you attract the mysteries of the kingdom to the mirror of your heart. As you pray and ask to teach, the mirror catches these images and realities of the kingdom. And he says, then your vision is the fire, and you touch the hearts of those that you speak with. We were mentioning earlier about, how are you doing for time? We mentioned earlier about the embryonic stage, the physical stage, and finally the stage of heavenly influence in our life. And these three stages all have to do with the afterlife. And each one reflects into the other. For instance, Abdu'l-Baha says in quite an interesting two passages, he says that the gifts of the Spirit are circling around the soul in the same way that the powers of the physical being are circling around the embryo in the womb, waiting for the embryo to reach that stage where that gift of sight or hearing or whatever you might be enters into the embryo. Likewise, he says, when we become Baha'is, or as our spiritual life is growing, the gifts of the Spirit are there for us constantly. They're shining on us all the time. As we prepare, as we ascend up this ladder of vision, those powers begin to become manifest in us, manifest themselves. And that makes such a difference in the way we could serve mankind. He tells us that we will enter the next world at the same level of development that we leave this one. That's a bit frightening because we're all getting older and we think, well, if I read what the spirit of faith is, I don't see it in myself. I mean, I have faith, I believe in the faith, yes. But the gifts of this thing that he promises us, I don't see them manifest in myself. Maybe you excuse yourself and say, I don't see them manifest in many other people either, so So what is it? You know, there's an anecdote about Abdu'l-Baha when he was in New York. The friends took him to Schenectady, to the General Electric laboratories. Even back at that time, they were headed by Professor Steinmetz. He was considered the genius of electricity in the whole world. Along comes this entourage of Abdu'l-Baha with some other robed individuals and Americans all coming to see what he's doing there. So he's striding ahead of them and he's telling them this machine is for that and that's for this, and this particular set of things is the greatest challenge we have and we're trying to solve it, and it's this, and it consists of this and that, and they translate all that to the master. And the master says to him, translate and tell him that if he applies the principle of this to that, he'll solve his problem. And he hears that and he goes. After that, the party moves forward. He's following them now, saying, who is this man? He's the greatest electrician in the world. He's solved my life problem and challenge. Okay. They go outside, and Safakini says to the master, what? But Abdu'l-Baha, is it that you know everything? And Abdu'l-Baha says, no, he said, but whatever I know, I see written on tablets before my eyes. They're all kind of gasping, looking at the master and hearing this. And then he says, this power is available to each one of you. We sell ourselves short, friends. You have that expression in English. We give up too easily for the goals. They're so great. That's the intention of God, is that we should reach maturity, that we become mature fruit, that we develop the things that are hidden within us. Do we want to sacrifice that? Don't give up on yourselves. He has not given up on you. Don't ever give up on yourselves. Arise fresh with the influence of the verses of God and see what little steps open before you. All of this, of course, comes from the manifestation of God. You know, I was reflecting. Sometimes the small things, annoying things of the present development of the faith, and that this happened 30 years ago too with other things, but now there's present day things about the plan. You know, you may have some bother about the plan. Somebody's pushing you too much to do this or that, and you don't like it. So all those things, somehow we have to relate back to the manifestation and understand how he came. Single and alone he came. And think of the vision that Baha'u'llah gives us that's so far ahead of science, that the universe is without beginning and without end. It's endless. There's no, you know, the Hubble spacecrafts, now they've gone out there and has this telescope, and they looked right away, they focused at what they thought was the end of the universe, and they got there and they saw that the same universe that was there continues on forever as far as they can see. So there's no end to it. And if I could derive my own understanding from the tablets, the purpose of creation, of this physical creation, of this phase after human beings are born into the physical universe, is that people would come to know and recognize their Creator and move to the next world having learned the lessons of light and darkness and good and evil, move to the next world where they are the objects of the celestial bounties and rewards of God. And that's universal. That everywhere, Abdu'l-Baha says, a planet without creatures, without souls, is like a body without a head. Why would we imagine that the universe is not teeming with every planet, with its civilizations and with its creatures, every one of them receiving a stream, an endless stream, he says, of manifestations of God that appear unto it, inspire them, and move those souls onto the next world? It's just too big for us to kind of put in our little brains, you know. And then the God of all this endless universe, all these galaxies. One of the things in the Hubble, you see something that looks like intestines, all tubes going, filled with little sparkling lights. Those little sparkling lights are each galaxies of trillions of solar systems, of stars and solar systems. Then we want to wake up in the morning and when you say, oh God, my knee hurts. Can you help me with making my knee better? Okay, we have healing prayers for those things, but those healing prayers come from the manifestation. And Abdu'l-Baha says the personality of the divinity is in the manifestation, not in the essence. You can't ever get to the essence to address it like a human being. You're free to address your prayers, but they're going, you say, well, I don't pray to Baha'u'llah, I pray to God. Yes, Baha'u'llah gave you the very words wherewith to praise the Creator. So naturally, he's involved, but you move beyond that. Shoghi Effendi says, at first you focus on the manifestation, then you move beyond with your prayers. Because you see the light and the guidance that's coming through him, and that transforms you. The role of the manifestation is essential in creation. Think of, again, we go back to the gleanings. He says, all beings live, move, and have their life in the manifestation of God. And Baha'u'llah in the Haykal says that we're like fish in the sea of his reality. Now, the fish in the sea, sometimes they say, what water? I don't see any water. Where's the water? We're immersed in the reality of Baha'u'llah. This Sun of Truth, okay, is a focus, but actually the other image is a sea. We're constantly nurtured by that sea. And if it weren't for that bounty, we wouldn't have any existence. But we're happy to look at the naturalists, materialists that Abdu'l-Baha says, they're hopeless, like Her Highness the cow, who is able to deny the existence of God without any effort. We have to make theses and write papers and explain why we're atheists. It's interesting to review those talks and see what the Master says, because it helps us perhaps in, as we were saying, that he's the greatest example of how to approach the public or how to talk to people about the problems of modern life. They're still quite applicable. They're not going to die out. They're part of the essential nature of human beings. The wonderful vision that Shoghi Effendi gives us. It's all right. I've got Victoria on my side. It's wonderful. The wonderful vision that is in the writings about 3 stages of divine grace. One is the diffusion of divine light, the infusion. Let's see if we can get the translator to help with these. Infusion, he says that the manifestations of God, when they come, they're the spirit that they radiate into the reality of the world makes the world pregnant with possibilities. And the divine bounties are there in abundance. We had twin manifestations of God, and then we had an ocean of martyrs, many of them your own forefathers, nurturing this tree. And then this bounty, which is infused into creation, Abdu'l-Baha begins the process, what he calls diffusion of that light. It's infused, and now he causes the apostles of Baha'u'llah, the servants of God, to arise and diffuse this light over the whole face of the earth. And Shoghi Effendi organized the systematic diffusion of the divine light. Once covering the face of the planet in the surface of it, he tells us that we will reach the stage of suffusion. Infusion, diffusion, suffusion, which is the penetration of the life of the spirit and the reality of the cause into the societies all around the world. Now, the House of Justice is introducing us in this new methods of teaching, and right now focused on the junior youth, to create this new model of society in neighborhoods. Let us think about this transition stage. It's not to condemn what was before. It's to see how that has led to the possibilities ahead of us. And if we can't take part in it directly in the activities, lend our spiritual support. Let us lend our prayers. And I know you people are amongst you are the builders of the ark of God. The contributions came from you. You think God is going to forget that? Not going to forget it. You are the beloved of the Lord wherever you are, as long as you remain turned towards him. And he's never, Mr. Olinga said, the Guardian said, Baha'u'llah will never remain in our debt. We arise, we do things, we sacrifice, we give to the cause. Everything. He's not going to want to come out at the end and have to thank you so much for what you did. He's going to give you bounties that you have to say, thank you, Lord, for what you've given me. This is the nature, I think, of this stage we are in the divine plan. And I hope you will all take refreshment from this conference and from the things that are said here and arise inwardly. If you're too weak to do it outwardly, at least inwardly arise in a new spirit of dedication and appreciation and praise of those, whatever movement they're doing in the outside world. But don't forget this pioneer call to the realm of the love of God. Thank you very much.